A breath of fresh air. It's Sunday Sanctuary with Petra Bagust.
Breaks my soul and cried. My mind is moving slow. Far from all I know. Give me time to know. My mind is moving slow.
E ngā manu, e ngā reo, mai ngā haue whā, ta tū mai nei ki te manga o tēnei rākau whakaruruhau. Tau mai nei ki tēnei kaupapa e pāpaho atu nei ki a koutou arā ko Sunday Sanctuary. Ko Petra Bagust tēnei e rere ana ngā mihi ki a koutou. So, to all of you from every corner of this wonderful country of ours, feel free to rest, to land on the branch of this sheltered tree. Welcome to this project, this kaupapa called Sunday Sanctuary. It is for you. It belongs to you. I'm Petra Bagust and I acknowledge all of you. Hey, our episode this morning is all about loneliness. Hands up, who has ever felt lonely? Because look, feeling lonely, when you feel lonely, you are literally not alone. It is a universal human experience. And I just feel like somehow, that just takes a load off, doesn't it? It just means you're not a weirdo or wrong for feeling lonely. It means you're a human. So, community, deep connection takes time to build. And it's actually okay to find yourself feeling alone or lonely in the middle of your life, at the beginning of your life, towards the end of your life, at different seasons when things change. We might lose a connection or break a connection or need to build a new connection, and that is okay. So there are things we can do to move towards connection, and we need deep connection for our survival. So loneliness is in essence inviting us to survive and to thrive. And today I'm very happy to say we're talking to a couple of awesome human beings, including David Letele from Buttanbean Motivation and former CEO of World Vision, Clarke. And they're going to share pretty personally, I'm hoping the men show up and get vulnerable, because I think, loneliness is what happens in us and to us and within us. So it is a very personal feeling, and I'm just really looking forward to exploring it. But what I would like to do right now is take a moment to experience awe.
Awe, wonder, surprise, incredulity, admiration, marvel at the world we live in. It's Sunday Sanctuary with Petra Bagust.
Guess what? Have you looked in the sky recently, clouds and rain aside, and seen the moon and gone, oh my goodness, there it is, the moon. And it's hard to imagine sometimes that it's an actual planet. Sometimes it feels like the moon is a caricature of itself. It's this thing that we can photograph or draw or, send the moon emoji. It's this part of us it's just ever present. There's the moon. Oh, there's the moon. Oh, look, it's higher in the sky or it's lower in the sky. But did you know that the moon is 384,400 kilometres away? That's a lot of kilometres. That is enough room for just over 8,008 Banks Peninsulas in between here and the moon. Or if you're more of a North Islander, you could say you could fit 1,171,951 Auckland Sky Towers laid end to end. Oh my goodness. So, I think this is the best way to think of it, in fact. If you've got a car with cruise control, say you set your car on cruise control 100 kilometres per hour and drove non-stop all day, all night, in a straight line towards the moon, it would take you 160 days to get there. Wow, that is a long way, and there's not even a road, so you wouldn't make it. So look, Apollo 8 astronaut Jim Lovell once shared a realisation he'd had while he was orbiting the moon. He realised that he could hold his thumb up and he could hide the earth behind his thumb, and that everything he'd ever known, everything, his whole world, was behind his thumb. He orbited the moon in 1968. He's still alive today. He's 95. And I guess there is something about imagining big distances or picturing greatness and scale that gives us a sense of our smallness in the world, and that can be a comforting feeling, even though it sounds or feels like it might be distressing. It actually is quite nice to come home to the tininess, the smallness of ourselves at times. All right, I am done waxing lyrical on the moon. Oh, did you like that waxing? Okay, I'm now going to head into Examen, because Examen is a beautiful part of Sunday Sanctuary where we take a look back. So I want you to do a grounding practice. And if you've listened to a couple of Sunday Sanctuaries, you'll know this well. It's where you notice. So I want you to take some deep breaths in. Ha ki roto. And a deep, long exhale. Ha ki waho. And I want you to notice where you are, where your body is. Can you breathe in again? Ha ki roto. And relax your shoulders. Ha ki waho. Can you open your hands, like release your hands? I mean, if you're driving, maybe don't, maybe hold on to the steering wheel. But can you ground and relax where it's possible? Feel free to close your eyes if it's safe to do so. And now that you are present in your body, just notice where you might be holding any tension, where there might be a tightness or a stuckness or a pain. This pain doesn't have to be physical, but it could show up physically. Because I think what it would be worth us doing today is looking for emotional pain. Is there a place in your body where you feel alone or abandoned or stuck or a little lost or confused? And can you, when you breathe in next, send aroha, send love, send life to that area of your body, and just allow it to be there. Allow the darkness, the confusion, the lostness, the stuckness, the difficulty to be present, and then to be enveloped or washed or covered in life, in love, in breath. We can allow ora, life, modi, the essence, the vitality of who we are, aroha, love, to wash in, sustain us and replenish us, and wash out, be given to another, released, let go of. I hope that was resourcing for you. And look, this is something that can be done at any point. And if you noticed some feeling or tension or a word or emotion came up in your body, maybe jot it down somewhere and think about it during the day. Send oxygen to it, send life to it, send love to it, and see if it shifts. It's possible to change things at a cellular level when we consciously engage with our creative imagination, with our spirits, with our souls. So thank you for joining me in Examen.
Food for the Soul on Sunday Sanctuary with Petra Bagust.
Okay, now I think it's time to delve into a definition of loneliness. Let's learn more about this emotion. And let's, in fact, kind of increase our emotional vocabulary, as we've been doing during Sunday Sanctuary, using Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. So today we're going to add to that lexicon, that vocabulary, and we're going to add more understanding and a definition of loneliness. And who better to do it with than the marvellous Grace MacArthur. It's lovely to have you with us to shed light on our emotions. What are we going to do with Atlas of the Heart today? I'm guessing we're going to look at loneliness.
We are, but when I was thinking about loneliness and how Brene describes it in the book, you can't really talk about loneliness without also talking about connection.
Ooh.
Because that's sort of what we're after when we're feeling loneliness. And so Brene talks about how critical social connection is. So hunger is warning us that our blood sugar is low and we need to eat. And thirst is warning us that we're dehydrated and we need to drink. And loneliness is telling us that we need social connection. It is a warning sign saying you need to connect.
It's an appropriate, healthy warning sign.
Yeah,
telling us to take action.
Right. Yeah. So just like we don't deny our hunger and our thirst, we shouldn't deny our loneliness, but often we do. Because we may feel shame about feeling lonely, or it might not make sense. It might make us wonder if we aren't likable. It can bring up all sorts of emotions. And at the heart of loneliness is that absence of meaningful social interaction.
Okay, so meaningful social interaction is a key word there.
Yeah.
And I was also thinking just something that sparked in me, as a woman, I will deny my hunger at times. So there are layers of complication, aren't there? I will be like, I'm too busy to stop and have a drink. I'm too busy to eat. Or if I skip this meal, then that's going to be great for my waistline. I don't think that's actually true, but, we do have a complex and nuanced relationship with our triggers.
Yeah, with our needs.
With our needs.
And we are quick to justify why we should deny them and shove them down. Yeah, so, and I think it's kind of interesting because sometimes it feels like we shouldn't feel lonely. Like we may have people all around us, but we still have this sense of loneliness. And it's this perceived social isolation is what she talks about. So it could be that we've been pushed to the outside of a group that we value, or we lack a sense of true belonging in that group, or whatever it may be. It may not look from the outside like we're actually alone, but there is something missing. And so what we're after when we're feeling loneliness is true belonging and connection. So not just people around us, but true connection. And Brene defines connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued.
Nice.
When they give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship. That is a big definition. And we don't often have all of those things. We don't have that lack of judgment. We don't often feel seen. We don't necessarily feel like we're getting fed and sustained from the relationships, which is why even when you're surrounded by people, you can still feel lonely because you actually don't have that true connection.
Yeah, and I think about some relationships that I've had in my past that were giving relationships, and I would leave an interaction just feeling empty, like feeling drained, like I had poured myself into that other person, but with no reciprocity, no exchange or mutual giving and receiving. And I realised that I had to make sure that in my life there were enough relationships that were give and take, was just how I described it.
Yeah, because there are those people that you connect with that something happens and there's that spark and there's that sort of environment of sustenance and strength, and you leave feeling really filled up. So there's something going on there where you're experiencing true connection, and that's like that antidote to loneliness. And I guess, it's not always possible to get that true connection. And so it's not always about surrounding ourselves with more and more and more people, but figuring out what is it that gives me that true connection. And then Brene also sort of stresses the importance of owning the loneliness. recognizing it and slowly taking those brave steps towards that deeper connection.
So does she describe what owning the loneliness looks like, feels like?
She doesn't, but I would say that I think it is just like when we acknowledge that we're hungry. Like, we can go through our day so quick, not even thinking about our needs, and then we get to the end of the day and we realize that we've skipped lunch and we're actually running on empty and we're getting cranky and we're hungry. I think we could probably go through life in a similar way in regards to loneliness, and we fill up our lives with work and hobbies and keeping busy and doing the stuff around the house, and then something feels empty at the end of the day because we're not acknowledging what it actually is. So I would say one of the first steps would probably just to be to stop and to actually really interrogate and think about what it is that we're feeling, which is hard to do because I've felt lonely many times in my life, and it's kind of hard to admit that you feel lonely because then you're acknowledging that something's missing and you're opening yourself up to potentially the disappointment of not getting that connection and that belonging that you're after.
But you're also opening up yourself to the potential of getting the connection that you're after.
What goes right? What if I do get that connection? What if I can be brave?
Yeah, what if I reach out to someone? Or what if I think about people who I've had that spark of energy that is, feeling sustenance and feeling strength, and I pursue getting together with them and seeing if that spark's still there. Yeah,
I often think about with like romantic relationships, we're very intentional because you have to be kind of clear. So, you ask someone on a date or you have the conversation about what are you feeling, where are we at? But with friendships, we don't often do that. It's a lot more unspoken. And I've often thought about how can we be more intentional about sort of calling something out in a person and saying, hey, I think that there is this true connection and belonging here in this friendship or in this community, and like taking steps to be more intentional and to cultivate that belonging in your life.
Awesome, Grace. That's fantastic, Grace MacArthur. Thank you so much for sharing some of your insight on Brené Brown's Atlas of the Heart with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Ooh, I feel more equipped already to approach loneliness productively, to not be freaked out by feeling lonely, but to ask the question or create a moment of space to say, hey, is this loneliness? What's the loneliness telling me? Now, there's a saying, if you want somebody to do something, you ask a busy person. And we thought, wow, it'd be amazing to talk to Dave Letele about loneliness. He's a man who's overcome so much in his own life, but he'll be way too busy. And when we made the call, he said he'd love to come in. So I can't wait to talk to Dave Letele and find out his experience and understanding and growth with loneliness. So he's coming up in a moment. In the meantime, feel free to share this episode with a friend or somebody who you think might like it. And follow along on Instagram. We're at Sunday Sanctuary NZ. To be honest, we love stars and moons. If you want to give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, that would be glorious.
Sunday Sanctuary, a reset for your soul.
Welcome back to Sunday Sanctuary. We are talking loneliness all day long. Wow, it's quite confronting, isn't it, to really face a feeling that is quite uncomfortable and, dare I say it, sometimes shameful. So we went looking for sacred texts. Where is this discussed in our culture? And guess what showed up? Yes, Home Alone 2. So do you remember the pigeon lady? She's sort of on the outskirts socially. She's somebody who, people don't pay much heed to or attention to. And Kevin McAllister ends up in the rafters of Carnegie Hall with the pigeon lady. And what are they chatting about? Well, you guessed it. Isolation and loneliness.
So, do you bring your friends up here?
I haven't got many friends.
Oh, sorry.
I'm like the birds I care for. People pass me in the street. They see me, but they try to ignore me. They prefer I wasn't part of their city.
Yeah, it's sort of like that with my family. I'm kind of the pigeon of the house, just because I'm the youngest.
Everyone fights for position. Everybody wants to be seen and heard.
I guess so. I'm seen and heard pretty much. But then I get sent to my room a lot, too.
I wasn't always like this, you know.
Oh, what were you like before?
I had a job. I had a home. I had a family.
Did you have any kids?
No. Oh, I wanted them. But the man I loved fell out of love with me. That broke my heart. And whenever the chance to be loved came along again, I ran away from it. I stopped trusting people.
No offense, but that seems like sort of a dumb thing to do.
I was afraid of getting my heart broken again. You see, sometimes you can trust a person, and then when things are down, they forget about you.
Maybe they're just too busy. Maybe they don't forget about you, but they forget to remember you. I don't think people mean to forget. I think it just happens. My grandfather says, my head wasn't screwed on, I'd leave it on the school bus.
I'm just afraid if I do trust someone, I'll get my heart broken again.
I understand that. I used to have this really nice pair of rollerblades. And I was afraid if I wore them, I'd wreck them. So I kept them in a box. And do you know what happened?
No.
I outgrew them. I never wore them once outside. I just wore them in my room a couple times.
A person's heart and a person's feelings are very different than skates.
Well, they're kind of the same thing. If you aren't going to use your heart, then what's the difference if it gets broken? If you just keep it to yourself, maybe it'll be like my rollerblades. When you do decide to try it, it won't be any good. You should take a chance. Got nothing to lose.
But a truth in there somewhere.
I think so. Your heart might still be broken, but it isn't gone. If it was gone, you wouldn't be this nice.
Thank you.
I guess the thing I love about that clip is that wisdom can come from surprising sources. So, from a stranger, from the internet, from somebody older or younger, a different walk of life or a different nationality, and this idea that everybody is deserving of wisdom. So, Kevin, the character, is like loving on the pigeon lady. He is offering her his young person insight. And I think that there's a profound goodness in being open to wisdom and being willing to be surprised by where it will show up in our lives. So, speaking of wisdom, I'm delighted now in studio to have our special guest, Kia ora talofa.
Kia ora.
David Letele from Buttanbean. You're the man. You're like, it feels a little bit like you're the guy saving New Zealand right now. You're like doing pretty important mahi.
Yeah, we're just doing our best. There's lots of people like us out there in the community doing great work. It's that we have a good profile.
Yeah.
And we can highlight what's going on. That's really what I use the profile for.
Cool. And look, this might be a little bit left of centre, I don't know, but today I'd like to talk to you about loneliness.
Loneliness.
Yeah. Like, give me a little insight into Dave as a young fella. Like, what was your life growing up? Were you surrounded by whānau and mates, or did you have a moment where you were like, mate, man, I feel just a bit isolated and alone here?
Yeah, well, it was a roller coaster of a life. My father was the president of the Auckland chapter of the Mongrel Mob, and all that comes with that life. He went away when I was 5, and I got shipped off, sent to Australia to live with his parents, my grandparents. Very strict Seventh-day Adventist. I'm not sure, are you familiar with Seventh-day Adventist?
I know a little bit about it.
Very strict.
Yeah.
You add Samoan to it, it's 1,000 times strict.
Oh, man.
It's strict, man. There's no... From Friday sunset to Saturday sunset, back then you couldn't play. There was nothing. You went to church all day Saturday, and if you weren't in church, you were either reading the Bible or resting. And it was just hard as a kid coming from where I was to then being that. So that was a lonely time, as well as at church. It was a Samoan church, Mount Druitt, and I couldn't speak Samoan, so I felt like an outcast there. And, people knew that my father was in prison, so I would often get teased about that. So it was a lonely time growing up over there.
Did it make you resent God?
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it was, those times, it's not like that now, but those times the deacons were more like bouncers at a nightclub. So if you got caught outside of the service, and of course I found it boring, so I couldn't understand what was being said, so I'd often try and go out. If you get caught, you get a hiding. Whatever they broke a branch off, whatever was around, they'd hit you with. So that was my experience of God and church, and it turned me off it. And I guess it was the same thing with my father and my other uncle who went that path too, where loving family, loving parents, good home, but very, very strict. And they went off.
Yeah.
And so now, I am faith-based. Everything we do in BBM is faith-based, but I don't believe you have to go to church to be a Christian.
Yeah.
It's just how you, it's funny. I spoke at a church and I've never been invited back since that time. I said that, I got up there and I said, let me ask you a question. What time does this service start? 10 o'clock. And what time does it finish? 1 o'clock. Well, don't be 10 to 1 day a week Christians. It's what you do outside these walls that count. And then these old school people were like, what the heck? But it's true.
It's true.
So yeah, everything we do is around just trying to be a good person.
Yeah.
And help others.
Yeah. And you don't have to do that inside of any building.
Yeah, church.
I mean, it's lovely to get together, right? It's lovely to be with people.
What's the connection, right?
Yeah,
that's what church, like the church that I went to, Seventh-day Adventist one in Papatoetoe, Papster, that's what it's about. It's the connection. And what we do in BBM is give people something to belong to. You look at the increase in gang numbers, it's because a lot of these kids want to belong to something. We need to offer something positive for them to belong to. BBM's a gang, we have a patch, but it's something positive. The Lion Club's a gang. I went to my mate became pres of the Remuera Lions Club.
Wow.
And he invited me there, and I went along with another mate, and I got up to speak, and I said, this reminds me of a gang patching. See all these Remuera people go, there's George Drop. I said, well, you have the pres, you have the secretary, you have it's all the same format, same structure. It's just something positive or it's something negative.
So do you think belonging is the antidote to loneliness, or an antidote?
100%. Like, we help a lot of people that have been hiding away from the world. We have a program called From the Couch, where people, maybe 200-300 plus kilos, have many long-term health conditions and are severely depressed. And it's being evaluated, right? And Massey University, who's doing the evaluation, can't believe it, because they've never seen people lose weight, all their medical, the blood pressure, the heart, it's all going down, right?
All the movement is in the right direction.
Yep. And at the same time, their mental health, so they get measured for severe depressive symptoms. At the start, everyone, the graph's off the chain. At the end of it, virtually no one. So, because you can lose weight and be miserable. So what we're doing is helping people to be healthy and happy, and it's all about the connection. That's what we're sharing the journey. We're all in it together.
Can we talk about another aspect of loneliness? Say you've got to make a change, right? Say you've been hanging out with your tribe, your crew, have led you in some ways that aren't so life-giving. So for my friends, it might be that it's just all, I don't know, they're just like moaning and whinging, and you just feel low. You hang out with your mates and you feel like, oh gosh, where's the positivity? But for some other people, like, they're being led towards behaviour that's potentially harmful or unhealthy. Like, when you're making a change, when you say, I actually don't want to live like this now, I don't want to keep doing and saying and thinking the same things as I've always been doing and saying and thinking, that can be quite hard to break ties, can't it? That's a brave but potentially lonely move.
It's tough. It's real tough. A couple of things. I remember, I've never really talked about it. It is in my book, but it's the filtered version, so I don't get in trouble. The lawyers took most of the good parts out. But I remember sitting in a gym in Australia by myself after some stuff went down, and I was living this life of being a gangster. And that saying is, when the party's over, everyone's gone. And it is so true. Everyone wants to be a gangster until it's time to do gangster stuff. And it's so true. When I was buying all the drinks and paying for all the drugs and doing, I was the bank. I had everyone around me, But as soon as I lost that and I needed people to come help me, I had no one. and it was really, really lonely time. And I talk about it to our group all the time. Surround yourself with good people. So at the start of my journey, when I reset, I didn't have good people around me. I had to, but I do believe when you start again and you say yourself, I'm only going to surround myself with good people, and you put that energy out, you do attract those types of people to you. And that's what's happened. The hard thing is with family. One of the guys we've helped to lose 150 kilos. He was 295 kilos, almost dead when I met him. Unbelievable. On a sickness benefit for 15 years. He works for us now full-time running Mamonuko Gym.
Wow.
When he started, and he wanted to hang out with me, I was training another guy, and he wanted to hang out with us. He goes, I want to come train with us. Of course you can. I said, but there's one rule. I said, anyone you're hanging out with now who's inviting you out to eat crap and drink crap knowing you're almost dead, you need to cut them. And if they don't support you, they were never your friends, so who cares? If they are truly your friends, they'll support you. So and it's a hard decision to make, but you have to do it. Same thing with family. You have to be the example. Obviously, you can't choose your family, but you have to be the example.
Yeah. And did he do it? He
did it. Yep. He's one of our main team leaders now. He works for me full-time, running a Manuko Gym, leading the From the Couch program, lost 150 kilos, had 3 boxing matches. One of them was on Joseph Parker's undercard. I asked him after that fight, did you ever think you'd be in the boxing ring before Joseph Parker? And he goes, 3 years ago, I was at home by myself elevating my leg, because he had a massive lymphedema in between his legs, which would leak. And it's just, he's living his best life before he was hiding away from the world.
So can we talk about that idea? Like you said, you surround yourself with good people. So you put out this, you go, I'm going to surround myself with good people, and you put out that energy in the world. And I hear what you're saying, right? Is there any practical step that you think you took? Like when you're sitting in that gym and the party is over and no one is there for you, like making an internal decision is profound. What else? What?
So these are the pillars that we live by in BBM and that we teach everyone. And the first thing is start. So I when I moved back here from Australia, 2014 in February, I had not 1 cent in my pocket. Broken-hearted, a broken man. I was 210 kilos. I'd lost my children, and that's where I understood what really matters. It wasn't the material things. It was losing my kids.
Yeah.
And I was staring at the roof at my sister's house on my niece's bed. I couldn't fit on this bed, and I was staring at the roof thinking, how did I F my life up so badly? Surely. And just the inner critic inside my head was just deafening.
Yeah.
You should just kill yourself, And I didn't listen, praise God,
Yeah.
All I did is I borrowed my sister's car. I borrowed petrol money from her, which was humiliating, and I drove to One Tree Hill and I went for a walk around the summit. And that's all I did. I started. I didn't overthink it. It's real simple, got up, went for a walk. While I was walking around that One Tree Hill, I thought I was no longer thinking about how crap life was. All I was thinking about was, this is a steep hill. Why on earth did I choose this place? But my brain had a chance to rest because it wasn't thinking about life. It was thinking about just getting to the top. And I had the natural endorphins of exercise running through my body. So I did that as much as I could to keep my mind off things. Second thing is being consistent. Understanding that life is not perfect. We are not perfect. Life sucks sometimes, and you're going to get knocked down and go through speed bumps and obstacles and roadblocks. But you've just got to keep getting up. I spoke to a girl at our course before coming here. She said, I'm going for a tough time. These last 3 weeks have been really tough. I said, you just got to keep going. Everything we have achieved in BBM, from someone who had not 1 cent to now having 3 gyms, a social supermarket, a food bank, a community kitchen, and we're about to spread throughout the country, all with not one paying customer, all doing it as a service to our people, came about because I was consistent. I never stopped. I get knocked down, I get up, and I go again. Third thing is being around good people. I always say especially when I'm talking to youth, I say, if you surround yourself with 5 idiots, what does that make you?
An idiot.
Yeah, the 6th one, to be precise. But if you surround yourself with 5 people that are on the same journey as you, and here's the thing, that are there for you, not for what you can do for them. In this life, the life I lived before, people were around me because of what I could do for them. But now they're around me because they care for me. They love me, and they only want the best for me. People that are hungry for success, hungry to be the best, not hungry for drugs or not hungry for Burger King or KFC or whatever it is.
Yeah, I hear you.
And the last thing is no excuses. And it's easy to say that, hard to live by. The only way you can live by that mantra is having a strong why and a purpose. My why was getting my children back. That's what drove me to keep getting up and keep exercising, to stop eating crap, to be around good people, just to keep the faith and to stay on the path. If you have a strong why and live with a purpose, you can overcome anything.
Yeah.
And it won't always work because no one's perfect.
Yeah.
But it should always be able to get you back on the wagon. Whenever I fall off, I think about what my why is. I think my why now is my family, but it's also my people, all our people, being an example for them.
Yeah.
That's what gets me back on. When I'm feeling down, even coming to this interview, I'm feeling like quite down at the moment, but I just think about my purpose and what I'm here for, and it's God's purpose for me, and that gets me back on the path and just keeps me moving and getting through those dark times.
Nice. So what does God do for you now? What role does God play in your your day-to-day?
Well, look, everything we do, I believe, is God's work. And for me, I truly believe that this is God's plan for me because it's the only reason that I'm not dead or in jail. It has to be. The stuff that I've gone through and done, it's a miracle that I'm not dead or in jail, and I'm not wasting that miracle. Nice. For me, it's my job and my purpose is to help as many people as possible, and that was God's plan for me.
Nice. Oh, well, I hope that God also gives you great joy and delight and rest, that you get to soak up in some of the resting that is a creative space and a resourcing space for you, so that you can go out and do more incredible work. Thanks so much for joining us today. Yeah, we didn't talk a little bit about the loneliness of leadership, did we? We talked a little bit about it. Did we mention it?
I mean, it is lonely being a leader because there's stuff a leader does where only that leader can do.
Yeah.
And it's like people look to the leader, and I find it very hard.
Yeah.
But again, it's making sure that you have people around you.
Yeah.
That you can be vulnerable to and that you can talk to openly. Too often vulnerable's looked at as a weakness, especially with men. But it's not weakness, it's actually strength. And you always feel better. Like I felt better after being vulnerable and talking about things with Rob.
Absolutely.
Which prepared me for coming in here to do this.
And I hear what you say. I mean, I know my son the other day, he's been sick, he's had the flu, and then all his internals, his final year of high school, they're all like, cramming up and they're all due. And he's like, Mum, I just feel depressed. And I said, yeah, that makes perfect sense, son. I bet you feel depressed. And we don't have to push those feelings away. We can just name them and acknowledge them and give them a little bit of space. Not the whole space. They don't get to take up the whole space. But he just gets to feel what he's feeling so that he can move through that feeling and on to the next step, which was to start doing the psychology assignment. But I appreciate your vulnerability, and I really totoko it. I really support it because it is lonely leading and it is hard work, and we do have to model the care and consideration and being able to do the hard things, which sometimes is saying no and pulling back and, resourcing yourself.
100%. Saying no, that's a tough thing to do.
Oh, it's so hard. Yeah. We can do it. Would you like to come out to lunch with me today?
I do have a...
Dave. No. No, I don't want to.
Okay. I was going to be late to the next meeting.
You were going to double lunch it.
Yeah.
You're the best. David Letele and Buttanbean Motivation, thanks so much for joining us on Sunday Sanctuary. Just lovely to kōrero with you.
Thank you very much.
Sunday Sanctuary, your mug of goodness.
This is a part of Sunday Sanctuary that I really love. It's where we go to you, our community, and we ask you a question. And because we're talking about loneliness today, we decided to ask you, how do you know or feel you belong somewhere? So I guess an antidote to loneliness is belonging. So how do you know or feel you belong somewhere? And this is what you said. can sit with someone in silence without feeling the need to fit in. Being included and asked how I really am, I can be authentic and relaxed. Thanks, Rebecca. When they know something intimate about me that they've shared or celebrated in a beautiful way. I feel like I belong somewhere where people assume generously of me. When I make a mistake or let someone down, it happens, and it's something very rare and precious when you know you are loved regardless. I'm with you, Anna. This from Ness. When I'm included or invited into spaces, despite it not being an obvious conclusion to some that I'd be there, like being invited to my friends' kids' parties, even though I don't have a kid, just because they consider me family and know that if I'd been able to have kids of my own, then I would have been invited, or not being excluded from dinner parties just because I don't have a partner and everyone else is a couple. This is a wonderful sense of belonging. Ellie says, when I feel comfortable to talk about anything and know I won't be judged. Ruthie says, when someone reaches out to me to check in rather than me being the first one to make contact constantly. I meet friends or neighbours on the way to the shops and we chat. That is a sense of belonging for Meg. That feeling of community and knowing you have a village around you if you need it, says Rochelle. And Chris says, when you don't feel anxious or inferior around the people you're with. Dolce says, when I can open the fridge and or cupboards, and it's totally normal. And my friend Lou says, helping herself to my cupboards, which is so true. When someone asks me, what do you need when I arrive at their whare or meet up with them? Thanks, Hannah. And Fee says, when people around you know the smallest details about you, quirks, likes, dislikes, and memories. Sade says, I know where the coffee cups, coffee and tea is, and I can put the jug on without it being an overstep. People remembering significant events that are coming up or have happened in your world, says Rachel. Mary Lou says, I moved back to New Zealand after 17 years away. I'm still trying to feel like I belong again. Rachel says, when you receive a message or an invite before you hear about it from someone else. When the Wi-Fi automatically kicks in when you walk through the door. Ha! I hear you, Lizzie. Just even a text can make me feel that sense of belonging. They took the time to message. It's from Rochelle. And finally from Grace. When I can be the weirdest version of myself. Thanks, beautiful community. What I'd like to do now, and I invite you to join me either in your imagination or in real life. I have got a big box of matches and I'm going to light one. And I'm going to use it to light a candle. And the reason I'm doing that today is because not everybody feels like they belong everywhere all the time. And so today we light a candle and hold the people who don't feel like they belong today. Today I light this candle and I hold in my mind and my heart the people who feel alone. And maybe it will even be like a reminder to reach out and into somebody's loneliness today. All right, coming up on Sunday Sanctuary, we have got a wonderful human being called Chris Clarke coming into the studio, and we've actually got a spoken word poem that we're going to play before we talk to Chris Clarke. It is a tear-jerker, so do not miss out on this, because during the pandemic, Japan introduced a minister of loneliness to address social isolation, and that actually inspired Sarah Kay to write a beautiful spoken word poem called The Minister of Loneliness. That's coming up.
It's the Sacred Text on Sunday Sanctuary with Petra Bagust.
I'm very excited to be joined in studio by Chris Clarke, who is the CEO of the Wilberforce Foundation. And before that, he was the CEO of World Vision. And he's worked in healthcare, so he's a man who knows a lot about looking after people, large and small. And what we're going to do is we're going to riff on this wonderful spoken word poem by Sarah Kay. It's called the Minister of Loneliness.
The Minister of Loneliness has abolished email. He is installing tin cans to every windowsill with a piece of string to someone else's window. Not several, just one. Each person, of course, does not need a lot of people to speak to, just the one. But the one must be reliable, must be available when needed. We are employing a buddy system now. Every day is a field trip to the Adulthood Museum, and we don't go home until everyone has been accounted for. The way you find your buddy is a nationwide game of Guess Who, where you sing the song that is always stuck in your head. Describe the movie you can't get through without crying, the hardest you've ever laughed, the outfit you wish you could pull off, and the only person who can spot you is the one you are assigned. All of Japan is a ball of string now. The economy has ground to a halt. Productivity is entirely impossible. Sometimes you go to talk into the tin can on your window and a knot in the string accidentally gives you someone else's conversation, the fading fabric of someone else's loneliness evaporating into the air between buildings. You are allowed to eavesdrop, but so is everyone else. The Minister of Loneliness has moved all kindergartens to the ground floor of elderly assisted living homes. There are daily story hours, animal shelters across the street. The Minister of Loneliness has not abolished Valentine's Day, but has instituted a nationwide bring enough for the class regulation, and nobody goes home empty-handed. The Minister of Loneliness has prescribed therapy for everyone, daily walks through the many gardens, opportunities for meditation by a brook, in the rain, under falling blossoms, or along a snowy riverbank, depending on the season. He has commissioned musicians and actors and poets to create concerts and radio plays and poetry readings to be pumped across the knotted tin can radio lines every evening. When you order dinner for one, the person who delivers it arrives with an appropriate ability and comfort level dance instruction video and 2 hours to spare. Grieving is encouraged and art making is rampant, but because of the knots, sometimes when you are expecting a visit from a grief counselor, the dance partner food delivery arrives instead. Sometimes they are the same person. The Minister of Loneliness isn't tired. He is the most popular man in the country. He has a crush on a middle school teacher across town, and everyone eavesdrops to hear the way he stumbles when she answers. Everyone is on the edge of their seats. Everyone forgets about dying because they can't wait to see what happens next. Everyone has opinions. The minister has to start a hotline where people can call in to tell him their thoughts. The tin cans rattle nonstop. The minister is grateful for the advice, but is nervous. His crush will hear the commotion. He is nervous. She prefers quiet. But he does not know for sure yet. He does not know what she is thinking, or how she prefers her tea, or whether she likes to walk in the rain. But he likes wondering. When no one is paying attention, when the windowsills are quiet, late at night awake, he does like to wonder.
Chris Clarke, welcome to the studio, and what a joy that was.
Petra, that's a wonderful, wonderful poem. I was smiling because when I first became a CEO, I was the CEO of a district health board, and I walked around the organisation. I noticed that people were emailing each other across the room rather than speaking to each other. And so at that stage, I thought as a CEO I had some power. I quickly learned you don't actually, in truth. But I decided to ban emails for the day. And so I just put an edict out that for this particular Friday, there was to be no emails and people were to talk to each other. It caused absolute and complete chaos. But actually, it was one of the most joyful and outrageous experiences that I ever had as a chief executive. It didn't work particularly well, but it did try and make a point that actually human interaction really, really matters. And when we reduce interaction to sending an email, we're much the sadder for it.
Yeah, and I guess it's that you can't edict people to behave well, can you?
No, I was 39 at the time. I thought perhaps I could. I learned very quickly, actually, as a chief executive, you don't really have that much power after all.
I have heard of people doing a similar kind of banning of emails as like any email we don't need to send, we don't send. So it was a general encouragement in the direction of, can you get up from your desk and go and talk to that person?
Yeah.
And yet, if you're in a certain situation, then people want the trail, don't they? They want the trail of,
They do.
I've done my bit, I've sent the email.
Yes, I can move on. You know, if I could, and I realise now I can't, but if I could, I'd ban social media for a day. Because I know my response to social media, which is I look at my Facebook feed, and I'm still on Facebook, I'm one of the older guys, and I'm reading about all these great lives that people are curating, and I'm sitting at home thinking, I'm watching reruns of Friends and thinking, I'm missing out. And actually, in some ways, social media adds to that sense of loneliness that I think a lot of us feel, because we get this perception that everyone else is having a great life and everyone else has some incredibly cool, good-looking friends, and it's just me sitting at home all by myself with the dog and my wife watching reruns of Friends.
Exactly. My daughter had a conversation with her yesterday and she said, Mum, everyone is in Europe. And I smiled because obviously our borders have opened up, and so there are a cohort of people who can afford it and are lucky enough to have the time and money, and they have gone and exploring the rest of the world. Now this is their chance after kind of 3 years of being homeward bound. But that sense of everyone else is doing something fun, and here I am,
all by myself, all alone.
Exactly. Something I really adored about that poem was the repetition of the word the minister. The minister, the minister. And I thought, wow, that word has become lost to me. This idea of what is a minister? What is somebody who ministers to somebody? It is, in essence, an act of care. It's an act of giving or caring or tending to. You tend to the needs of another when you minister to someone.
Very much so. And in religious terms, they often talk about ministers being vicars, at least in the Anglican Church. And the idea was that they were vicariously expressing something of the love and care of Jesus to their community. And we've probably lost that sense as well, but this idea that they were representing love and kindness and faithfulness and joy to particular communities.
Yeah, and even the word, that person's the minister, it gets detached from its meaning. But hearing that word, the minister of loneliness in Japan does this, the minister does this, there's that sense of incredible care being taken. One of my favourite lines of the poem was, the minister isn't tired.
Yes, I love that. The one I loved was the piece around presumably the Uber Eats delivery guy who delivers a 2-hour video, and how sometimes the messages get confused. We're all following the love life of this teacher. I just think that's just a glorious image. There's
a messiness to that, I guess, isn't there? Loneliness is something that probably, if we were to imagine what it sounded like and felt like, it's quiet, and it's isolating and it's reductive. But there's an interesting way of thinking about loneliness that we've both discovered, I think, and that is that as a species, we are designed to survive. So when we feel hungry, that's to keep us alive. It's an adverse feeling to make us eat, and
Absolutely.
When we're thirsty, it's an aversion feeling to make us drink.
Yes. So that sense of loneliness is often like a warning sign that you need to be connecting with people. And we feel it in a very kind of visceral way. We feel it in our stomachs often, just that sense of deep sadness. And it's prompting us to actually engage, to reach out beyond social media, to reach out beyond our own living room, to make connections with people. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but left unattended, it can become very destructive.
So isn't that a profound kind of like orientation towards loneliness? Because I think if we feel lonely, we feel like we've failed as a person. Something's wrong with us, because the feeling of loneliness happens on the person who is lonely, right? That's the feeling is inside of me when I'm lonely, and I'm like, I've got no friends, or I'm disconnected, or I've failed, or I'm so alone, no one wants to play with me. And yet that to recognize that it's a survival mechanism, it's a trigger, that it's human normal behavior to have a warning to say, hey, reconnect with community. You need to look out of yourself. You need to re-engage invigorate some of your relationships or pursue new healthy relationships or, get into society again, then we don't have to feel ashamed and broken and wrong about being lonely.
And also, I think we all feel hungry. And similarly, we all feel lonely. But the thing about loneliness is we think it's only me. I'm the only one not at the party. I'm the only one who hasn't got deep friends. In fact, it's a common human experience. And in some ways, I think that's quite empowering. I've just turned 60, which is a number I'm not especially keen to own up
You're
to, really.
actually at level 60 now.
Thank you. But what I've been doing over the last few weeks is, having hit that number, is thinking quite a lot about my friends and to what extent have I neglected my friends. And no, there's a really powerful story in Scripture. There's so many sad stories in Scripture, but one of the saddest ones for me is when Jesus himself felt lonely. And it's the night that he's arrested, and he knows what's about to happen. His friends don't. And he goes away and he says to them, please stay awake. Please stay awake for me. And he goes off to pray, and he comes back. And one of the most devastating passages in Scripture is he comes back to his friends and they've all fallen asleep on him. And I thought, that must have been one of the most lonely moments that Jesus has felt. And yet it really speaks to me, because I realise that in many respects I've fallen asleep on my friends. That, just the busyness of career, the busyness of family, the busyness of getting ahead, the busyness of just managing life, is that those friendships that were really precious to me when I was younger, when I had freedom, when I had time, I've neglected. And it came home to me very powerfully a few years ago when a very dear friend of mine, his daughter attempted to take her life. And I only heard about this sort of 3 or 4 days later. So I rang him to find out how he was and how she was. And his response, I felt terrible. His response was, Chris, I was going to give you a ring, but I knew you were so busy. And that was, for me, the wake-up call. I thought, I'd fallen asleep on my friend. And that's really challenged me to think about friendships and to think about loneliness, not just in terms of the breadth of the social circle that we all have, because some of those lonely people actually have seemingly the most number of friends, but actually the depth of my friendship. And so for this person in crisis, they didn't ring me because they thought I'd be too busy.
And that's in the poem. It's that you get paired with one person. There's a string and a can to one person. In the reading I've done around loneliness, it says that we just need a few deep connections.
Yes.
And one would be a brilliant place to start.
Wouldn't it?
And so it's almost like that, we risk, don't we? In inviting somebody into a deep connection, we risk rejection. We risk the fact that they might be too busy. But actually to reach out towards somebody who has or has been a good friend. Like, did you feel in that moment when that person confessed to you, oh, I knew you'd be too busy, did you think, oh, well, that's it, I've ruined it and that's my chance and now I can't be their friend anymore? Or did you think, wow, I'm going to change something?
I thought the latter. I thought, I'm going to change something. I've got to fundamentally change my lifestyle and where I'm putting my priorities. Otherwise, what's going to happen is not only will I fall asleep on my friends, but I will die a lonely, sad old man. And, it's quite interesting. I look at, people of my generation and realise that for many of them, their best friends started from school days. And that was when they hadn't achieved anything. That's when they had time. That's when actually they were vulnerable and they shared their stories and all that kind of stuff. And then all the stuff of life comes between.
Yeah.
And actually we lose the art of making friends because we lose the art of being vulnerable and really sharing something of our heart for fear that we'll be rejected.
Yeah. Well, actually, we're more likely to be accepted when we open up and share the fact that we're struggling with something, because everybody is struggling.
Absolutely. And like loneliness, all of us feel hungry and all of us at some time need to reach out and actually reconnect.
I was very surprised to hear that the loneliest group of human beings in New Zealand, research shows, are 15 to 24-year-olds, adults in New Zealand. 15 to 24-year-olds are the loneliest.
We've been doing some research as Wilberforce looking at New Zealanders' attitudes to faith, to belief, to Christianity and so on, and asking them what are their fears. And what's very interesting is that in that similar age range, loneliness figures in their top 3 fears. It doesn't figure in any other age group. Other fears, financial security and so on, figure. And I'd always thought that loneliness was old people. But actually what we're seeing is there's almost this pandemic of loneliness among young people, and New Zealand's not alone. Similar studies in the UK and elsewhere are identifying a similar crisis of loneliness among young people.
And even this is so true, I guess, too, to be able to see it and to be able to recognise it and to name it, like, I feel lonely. is a helpful place to start, because if you can acknowledge it in yourself, then you can take some action. You know, you
That's
can
right.
actually start to be a friend. And I liked this phrase that I read, which is people need help when they are lonely and also at all times. So this idea that we don't have needs, that a better way of being is to have no needs, is erroneous. So the idea that loneliness is a sign that there's something wrong with you or your ability to be a friend or have a friend, this idea that a person without needs is a better or more secure version of a person, these are not true or accurate. When people are lonely, they need help, and also at all times.
At all times.
At all times.
And it's no respecter. Loneliness is no respecter of income or age or background. Much of my career has been as a chief executive, and it's not a common life experience or one that I recommend to anyone. But it's quite interesting in terms of sitting down with other chief executives, and sometimes I'll ask the question, how many of you have a best friend? At most, half of them will raise their hands. And that then leads to a real conversation around what it is to be lonely and seemingly have it all in front of you, but actually be deeply and profoundly lonely. And I had some experience of that as a chief executive. You know, when you lead an organisation, there is a sense of loneliness that comes through position. But I was to experience it in a really profound way where a situation happened in my organisation and I knew I had to speak out. And I knew that in speaking out, it would be career limiting and probably career ending. I also knew that most of the criticism would come not from outsiders, but actually from my peers and the people that I journeyed with, sense of saying, why on earth did you do that? Why didn't you keep your mouth shut? But just this deep sense that I had to stand up and had to speak out.
So what was that? Was it for justice or for truth, or for what were you speaking out for?
It was about a behaviour that I felt had to be called. And this had been building for some time, and it wasn't a rash decision on my part. It had been something that I think I'd always realised that if we reached a certain point, I'd need to speak out. And I was working in a particular public context, so there's a high level of politics, both locally and nationally, associated to these roles. So you find yourself in these roles, and you certainly don't speak out every time. But I knew that if a line was crossed, I would need to speak out. And that happened. What I experienced was everything I knew, just the loneliness of standing alone and realising that there was a bullseye painted on my chest, that there was no one else to blame, no one else to point the finger at but me, and knowing that ultimately this would end in tears, knowing that I'd have to ultimately step down from my job, whether it was immediately or in 2, 3, 4 years' time, whatever, for the sake of the organisation. There's a peculiar sense of loneliness that comes with that. And I think a lot of people experience that. We won't talk about it very often, but that sense of where you do stand up for what you think is right and you bear the consequences of that. For me, it actually did end that career for me, which is a career that I absolutely loved. It didn't happen immediately. It happened sometime after that. But what I was surprised by in that sense of aloneness was this deep sense of, but I'm okay.
Yeah, so you see, you used the word aloneness, which is different to loneliness. Even.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I sense that in one sense, all of us at some stage in our lives will have to stand alone. And in a sense, how we stand alone and how we respond to our loneliness will very much determine, whether in a sense we're just buffeted by the winds, or whether in a sense we've got some sense of integrity and some sense of strength that we know we're okay.
What sustained you in that season of aloneness?
Family and some very close friends. So it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was that tight core of friends. Some of our friends were very critical of me, and that was a pain.
That would have been hard, yeah.
But there was a small group that just stuck with us. And what was lovely about that was the friends who continued to treat me as a human being, not as part of the story. So I'd become the war story. And most friends wanted to know about the war story, partly out of interest and curiosity and all that kind of stuff. But the real friends were the friends who turned around, knowing all this stuff was going on. We knew they were caring for us, but they were the ones who'd say, do you want to go to the rugby on Saturday? Or, hey, we're going tramping next weekend. Do you want to come? Or, hey, come around for a barbecue. In other words, they continued to treat me as a real person, not as the experience that was being seen in the media and all those kind of things.
Yeah, amazing. Wow, that is so interesting to hear, even the differentiation and the fact that in the aloneness, you weren't necessarily completely lonely.
No, I think that was the thing. And what I learned from that was in some sense, what true friends are like.
Yeah.
You know, my social circle, which had been really wide at that point, actually narrowed down to some few deep friends. And for me, I think the lesson I took from that is I want to be deep in my friendships. I can't do that with everybody. I just don't have enough time or bandwidth, but I can be deep with some.
Yeah.
And that's the journey that I've been trying to go on with my friends, is to deepen friendships with a few so that I don't fall asleep on them when they need me.
And a confession coming on, I think that I had this aspirational idea, and I don't know if I'd adopted it from someone, which is, I think when we make friends with the people who happen to be around us, right? They're our high school friends, and as we grow and mature, and depending on what road our life takes, we think our friends are going to be somehow a bit more fabulous or a bit more mature or a bit more spectacular further down the road. Like there's this progression of friendship that should happen perhaps. And I think I got trapped by this subconscious idea that I should have slightly more fabulous friends than I did, or where were they, or why hadn't they shown up, or and this just random kind of floating feeling. And during the COVID lockdowns, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, my felt need for my friends is palpable because I'm a people person. Yeah. And so here I was, I had my lovely family around me and a puppy dog, praise the Lord for the puppy dog. But I could not be kanohi ki te kanohi, I could not be face to face, hand to hand, hug to hug with my friends. And so I came to the conclusion that I would absolutely love on my friends, that I would stop this random unrealistic idea that some new improved friend version was on the horizon. I would love on my friends and cherish them and just make them the best friends that I have ever had. Like I would just choose my friends. Because it was easy, I think, for me to go, oh, look at that group, they're always going away together, or look at that group, they've all got this activity in common, or look at that group, they're all getting there. I don't know. It was like this, there was another way of doing friendship that I hadn't kind of somehow cracked. And so it's been a true joy for me post-COVID to just cherish my friends.
Yeah. They're special times, aren't they? You know, I find quite interesting, you read magazines about sort of famous rock stars and people like that, and occasionally you'll get photographs of them with their friends, and most often their friends are just that. They're actually school friends. You know, they're friends who were friends before they became famous. Yeah. And you wonder why did they keep them on? And I realised actually because they were genuine friends. They were there before they were famous, and they'll be there after they're famous. Yeah. And I think there's something kind of really special about that celebrities have normal friends. I think that's quite lovely. I've yet to know a celebrity, so it hasn't happened to me, but that just really appeals to me.
Yeah, it does, eh?
Yeah.
And I think there is maybe that season, like you say, where you've got time and you've got energy. And I love the fact that there are other seasons, like for women who have children, there's a season, or for when you get a puppy dog, you all of a sudden meet people who have dogs. Like you take up a new hobby. There are times when you can have new friends, and I think of the addition of a new friend to my life in the last couple of years, and it's a deep friendship. It's a truly deep friendship, but I've not known them for that long. And yet there was a meeting of minds, or a meeting of heart and soul, where you're like, yeah, we can go deep, and this friendship is a joy. So I don't think that we only get one chance.
I agree. And the other element is old friends, where you may not see them for 4, 5, 6 years, and you pick it up again, and you just pick up the conversation just where you left it off. And it's just a wonderful, rich, and a fabulous thing.
Such a wonderful, rich, and fabulous thing. Something that it would be nice to wonder on. I like the way the poem ends with wonder, that he lies at night, the minister of loneliness, and wonders. And that was inspired by the Minister for Loneliness. Japan decided to institute a Minister for Loneliness. And I know that we've got professors of loneliness here in New Zealand, so there's good work being done. Chris Clarke, thank you for joining us and sharing of yourself and your journey, both your aloneness, your loneliness, and your ability to be a good friend.
Thank you.
As many of you may well know, Sunday Sanctuary is loosely based on an old school church service. And one of the things those churches do each week when they get together is called communion. Communion. Now that sounds like a wonderful antidote to loneliness. It's got union in there, and it's got com, meaning together. And I've heard people say that one of Jesus' greatest miracles was maintaining 12 close friendships in his 30s. which is quite cute when you think about it. So you might think, well, what would this Jesus guy know about loneliness? But to be honest, at that final meal with those friends that we call the Last Supper, he seems to have a pretty clear idea about what's about to happen that night and the following day. And after the meal, they all head over to a garden where Jesus really wrestled with his quite awful fate. He was understandably deeply troubled. So he says to his friends, guys, can you stay awake and pray? And then he goes just a little way away from them and he pours out his anguish to his Father, God. And Jesus returns and finds every single mate asleep. He wakes them up and asks them, guys, can you stay awake while I pray? And once again, they all fall asleep. Imagine his loneliness in that moment of need, in that moment of wanting to be supported and seen and heard. He finds himself all alone. So he was just waking them up all again as Judas approaches, leading a group of soldiers to arrest Jesus. And, before the sun comes up, Jesus' best mate, Peter, would say, oh no, I don't know him. He's nothing to do with me. I don't know who he is. And it gets worse. Like hanging on the cross that day, Jesus calls out, my God, why have you forsaken me? So in that sense of complete bereavement, complete separation from his Father. And I guess that last meal the night before Jesus dies, he had a sense that he was going to be abandoned by his friends and followers and by God. And yet decided to go through with this extravagant act to embrace all of it. He offered himself as the bread and wine, as the antidote to all hunger, all thirst, at the deepest level, the antidote therefore to loneliness and so much more. So while in the eyes of some people he was a failed revolutionary, and his execution at the hands of the world superpower of Rome was evidence of that, the fact that it hadn't worked, looking back we can see that the kind of revolution he was leading wasn't a political movement, but something truly deeper, truly more profound. He modelled a different way of being in the world, a posture of determined vulnerability, and the only thing that has a chance of ultimately undoing any separation or loneliness we might feel. Well, it has been a joy to unpack loneliness. For me, it's been a journey of discovery. I feel like I understand the drivers of loneliness more. I feel like I won't worry if I sense loneliness in my life. I also feel more open to noticing perhaps loneliness in others and reaching out my hand of support or connection. And I think that this is kind of a posture that we can have in the world where we are no longer afraid of something in ourselves, then we don't have to be afraid of it in others. So for me, I call that a coming home to. So I feel like in part, doing this podcast has helped me come home to loneliness and the function that it holds in my survival, and also the function that it has of asking me to take action towards deep connection. And I love that invitation. I hope you've enjoyed it or gained something. Feel free to leave us a message about how this podcast has impacted you, or things that might have, inspired you to think or notice, or anything you'd like to share. We'd love to hear from you. I'd love now to leave you with a benediction about belonging. And this benediction was written by Kate Bowler, whose podcast is called Everything Happens. And this particular one was inspired by her conversation with Jeff Chu. So if you like the sound of it, feel free to check out her podcast, Kate Bowler's Everything Happens. Right, a blessing when you want to belong. Blessed are you, playing the stories of who you are through your mind like a film strip, where you got your laugh or love of music or those terrible navigation skills. You who can pinpoint yourself on a family tree, you who know exactly whose you are. And blessed are you when you don't belong, when you can't explain exactly how you ended up here, outside of what was acceptable, but longing to fit in nonetheless. Blessed are you in the alienation and the fear, the where will I find my people, the confusion or anger or still wounded from unbelonging. May you feel your own worthiness, May you feel your own belovedness. May you find yourself wrapped in a story larger than the one you can trace, a story of love and hope and courage, a story truer than the one you've been told. Blessed are all of us here in this family of God. Blessed. Ka kite anō, we'll see you in another fortnight for our next episode of Sunday Sanctuary.